Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we have the second part of the design diary. And right off the bat, we have two reveals. One, we have a name for the game. And the name of my game is A Land in Peril, the adventure game. And we also have an artist. And that artist is none other than Craig Price, aka Craig Lighthouse. Now, Craig is known on the channel for creating Devoured, and we have taken a look at this game before. This is the version that was available on the Game Crafter, but Devoured is going to be coming out in kind of a deluxe version through Exalted Funeral very soon, so that's super cool for Craig. And Craig is working with me to design the art for A Land in Peril, the adventure game. So here we have a first draft of a cover for the game here. I think it looks fantastic. It really does capture that hex crawl feel. And I think that Craig's art fits the theme and the world of this game really well, because this is kind of a darker and kind of twisted, gloomy style fantasy world. Here we have one of the classes that Craig designed. So there are 4 classes in the game. There is the magic user, the warrior, the rogue, and the adventurer. So here is the magic user. Very cool there. I like that kind of big, chunky, stark style. So all of the art in the game will be black and white. Okay, and here we have the depiction of the warrior. I like the unique look of this warrior, the bone armor. He looks like a very savage kind of warrior, and something out of Conan maybe. But all of the armor and the gear and the things that you will be equipping your character with, those don't have pictorial descriptions. Those don't have descriptions in the game. So it is kind of up to the player to decide, hey, if I buy a helmet or I find a helmet, how does it look? Well, maybe it looks like one of these kind of this skull helmet or something like that. I think that is really cool. And then here we have the overland map. So this is the first rendition. A few things need to change, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the map, with the way it looks. We have 4 quadrants, A1, A2, A3, and A4. There are 6 different kinds of locations that you can go to, in addition to a castle. So the castle is in the center here. And then there are boss layers, and that's where you will go once you have found enough quest gems. You will go to a layer to have a fight against the boss, and that's the way you win the game. The first player to defeat a boss is the winner. And then you can go questing in places like the Mystic Tower, or a dungeon, or a city, or maybe a ruins or a cave. You can also visit a village to have certain things happen to you. And then the castle here is in the center. That is where you will go back and turn your completed quest cards in for quest gems. And you need 4 quest gems in order to unlock one of the boss layers. These are roads here. So on the basic map, we have forests, we have grasslands and wilderness, and roads. And those are the main kinds of terrain on the base map. And there might be other maps that are released in expansions, and those might have other kinds of terrain. One thing I'm thinking of is an island-based map where you have a lot of water, and there are ship events and things like that. But I just wanted to briefly mention here some of the art, and I'm really happy to be working with Craig. I think his art fits the game really nicely. I love this box cover mock-up here for A Land in Peril, the adventure game. So this episode, we are going to be focusing on challenges. And we will be discussing challenges from 2 different perspectives. One of those is in-game challenges, what the player will be doing, what kind of challenges the player will be facing on a turn-by-turn basis. And the other kind of challenge is what kind of challenges I, as the designer, am facing while I am designing A Land in Peril, the adventure game. So let's talk about the designer challenges first. I think one of the biggest challenges that I am facing is coming up with 180 unique encounters. So there are going to be 9 different encounter decks in this game. You will have one encounter deck. Each encounter deck will have 20 cards. You will have one encounter deck for each of the 5 quest locations, and that includes the Mystic Towers, the dungeons, the cities, the ruins, and the caves. There will also be an adventure deck for the villages, an adventure deck for the roads, an adventure deck for the wilderness, the grasslands, and for the forests. So that is 9 different decks, 5 quest decks, 4 adventure decks. Each one of those decks has 20 cards. So I am having to come up with 180 unique locations, or unique encounters, I should say. One of my inspirations for this is, of course, Roger Deering's Dungeon Crusade. So Roger, in creating Dungeon Crusade, he made about 80 different dungeon encounter cards and a whole bunch of different overland encounter cards for the Avalon adventure game. And he inspired me to go big on this kind of stuff. And just reading through what he did has really inspired me to commit to this kind of scope and coming up with all of these 100 unique encounters. And I have all kinds of things. I have all kinds of random encounter books and charts and tables and cards and things to draw inspiration from. And so I'm just going to surround myself with a lot of inspiration, read a lot of fantasy to come up with these unique encounters. But, you know, when you have 180, how unique can each one be? How much detail can I go into? I only have the size of a playing card on the back, and there needs to be flavor text and mechanism text. And so how am I going to fit the text and the icons and the things on the card? What kind of rewards will be offered? How will I balance those rewards? So those are all things that are going into the challenge of me coming up with 180 encounters. And that is pretty much the next step for the design process of this game. Another thing is the difficulty level of the game in general. So I will make my game too easy because I like easy games. Now, I know some people like easy games, some people like difficult games. I just want to have fun on an adventure, but I do want that adventure to be meaningful. I want there to be some kind of risk, some kind of a risk to balance out the reward. I want there to be a threat. And so coming up with a really good difficulty level is another challenge that I am facing. Another is the physical limitation of space on the card. And we talked a little bit about that, just how I'm going to put the information on a card, how much text can I fit, and still keeping it looking nice. But also maintaining a small footprint is super important for me because if you guys remember in the first design diary, I said I want everything to fit in one of these Hold It Organizer card decks. And we are also the map is going to be small. So we will have our 8.5 by 11 map. So we'll have all of our decks of cards in the Hold It Organizer. We will have our map. And then we will have our character sheet and maybe some dice. And that's about it as far as table space goes. There is one deck of cards, and those are affliction cards. Those are bad things that can happen to you. And there are 4 afflictions in this game. There is poison, ensorcelled, and I can't remember the other 2. I have them right here. Let me look. I've recently begun to kind of modify those. And I think that was one of the challenges I was overcoming, was coming up with the afflictions and a cool way to implement them. So we have poisoned, stunned, ensorcelled, and confused. And those are going to be represented by cards. And when you get an affliction, you will just take one of those cards as a reminder. I was going to have the afflictions kept on the character sheet, but there wasn't enough space on the character sheet to keep track of all of the information. And a deck of cards is just very easy. So a play area of a game will look something just like this. And just maintaining that small footprint, maintaining that small space to maintain this kind of confined game that doesn't sprawl out all over a big table. You're not going to need a giant gaming table to play this game. Even when you play 4 players, the game is designed to be played on a small card table. I want to keep this game small, but I want to keep the variety high. and I want to keep the interest high. And so that is another difficulty that I'm facing, another challenge. Boss encounters. So, as I said, the game, you win the game by defeating a boss. There are going to be 6 bosses in the game, and each time you play a game, you will randomly draw 4 of those bosses, and you won't know what those bosses are. And I'm recommending that when you draw the boss card, you kind of slip it underneath your map, and each of the 4 boss locations in each of the quadrants will have a boss associated with it. And part of the strategy of this game, part of the tactics, part of learning how to play the game is reconnaissance, is getting those items, getting those abilities to reveal the bosses. So you can take a peek at the boss to kind of know what you're up against, know what kind of strengths you need to power up your character with, what kind of things that boss might be tough against, what kind of things that boss might be weak against. And so let me just read the goal of the game for you here. The goal of the game is to defeat one of the bosses threatening the world. To defeat a boss, you must first unlock its lair by collecting quest gems. In a normal game, you will need 4 quest gems to unlock a boss lair. To receive a quest gem, you will need to complete a quest in 2 different matching locations, 2 different matching quest locations. So 2 different dungeons, 2 different cities, for example. Then you will return to the castle and exchange your completed pair of quest cards for a quest gem. There are 5 different quest locations: dungeons, caves, cities, ruins, and mystic towers. Once you have 4 quest gems, you may travel to a boss lair to challenge the boss. If you succeed, you win the game, but don't take too long. With each turn that passes, the evil grows ever stronger, and the very land itself is in peril. A land in peril can be played solo or competitively, not cooperatively, solo or competitively, and the rules are the same for each. In the competitive game, the base game, the players are racing against each other to be the first player to defeat a boss. There is no PvP in the base game. PvP might be something I develop later. In a solo game, the player is simply playing for the adventure and wins if they defeat a boss. To win, defeat a boss. To lose, fail to defeat a boss, or if you're unable to complete quests because too many locations are destroyed. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But coming up with those boss encounters will be another challenge, because the boss encounters are a little bit different than other encounters and other challenges. They're a little bit more complex. I have the names for the 6 bosses, and I've started thinking about them thematically and how they will be portrayed in the game. And here we have the 6 bosses. So we have the Lich Fiend, Lord of Corpses, the Dark Mistress, Haunter of Dreams, the Silent King, Ruler of the Underrealm, the Verdant One, Steward of Nature's Wrath, the Star Dweller, Overseer of the Cosmos, and the Slumbering Beast, Sloth of Time. So those are the 6 different bosses there. Another challenge that I'm facing is balancing the economy in the game between items, weapons, armors, stat bonuses, enchantments, and gold rewards. And that's just going to take a whole heck of a lot of play testing to get that right. So since the last design diary, I've just about completed the rules. I'm getting really, really close. And just recently, I've had 2 great successes. And I've learned some of the lessons that or applying some of the lessons that I have learned. And that main lesson is don't patch, go back. If you guys remember in the last design diary, I talked about how often when I would be working on a game, designing a game, I would start the design, I would get to a point, a roadblock. And that roadblock would impede my ability to design further. And to get over that roadblock, I would create a patch. I would patch a bad rule. I would patch a bad mechanism, and then move forward again, hit another roadblock, apply another patch to a bad rule, to a bad mechanism. And then by the end of the design, I didn't have a good design. I had a bunch of patches patching bad designs, patching bad mechanisms, patching bad decisions. And so in this design process, whenever I get to one of these points, I'm stopping and I'm looking at what the real issue is and going back and correcting the problem before it starts. And I've had 2 really good successes that have really jazzed me up in the last couple of weeks with this. So one thing is there is a time, not a time limit, but a time pressure on the game. The longer you take, the more deadly things are going to get. At the end of each one of your turns on your character sheet, you will keep track of how many turns. So at your end turn phase, you will check off one check. These circles will be skulls, and those are called milestones. Originally, I had it so that when you checked off a milestone, the boss that you were facing would get stronger and more powerful. And that was creating some real complications in how I was approaching the design of the bosses, because not only did I have to come up with interesting and creative, complex encounters for each of the 6 bosses, but I had to keep in mind how to change each one of those as each milestone was ticked off. And it was too much. It was too much to keep track of. It was too much to design. It was too much information to put on a card, even a large card. The boss cards are going to be a little larger, like tarot sized. But it was a major roadblock in the designing of the bosses. And so I said, okay, what's the real issue here? What am I trying to solve? The thing I'm trying to solve is to put a little bit of time pressure, to light a little bit of fire under the feet of the heroes, of the players, so they don't just dilly-dally and walk around and get powerful and then eventually fight the boss where it's super easy. You know, something like Talisman. And when I play Talisman solo, that's how I play Talisman. I like that, but I want there to be a little bit of pressure. You will never lose by running out of time. Well, actually, you can lose by running out of time, but it would be pretty rare. But it will ignite some tension in the game. And so I went back and I said, okay, so what's the name of this game? The name of this game is A Land in Peril. So the land itself needs to be in peril. Something needs to be happening throughout the overland, where as time is ticking away, evil is getting stronger. They are sending out their forces, and they are doing what? They are destroying locations. And so each time you check off a milestone, you will roll for a random quadrant. So you will roll a d4 and either have quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you will roll a d6 and destroy a random quest location. So you might destroy a dungeon. You might destroy a cave or a mystic tower. And I thought that was really cool. And then you'll just cover up that hex with a little destroyed location token. And nobody can use that location to complete a quest any longer. And I thought that was really cool because not only does it create that sense of the land being in peril, how it also reinforces one of the main ideas I want for this game, and that is pressure luck. Because as you are going into the locations and you are undertaking the challenges in the location, having your encounters, you do have to think about how long you are staying in that location, because you can keep rolling dice and you can keep trying to solve the challenge. We'll go over the challenges in more detail in just a bit, but you can stop for a turn and then kind of reset and expand your dice pool for your next attempt if you wait a turn. But if you are in this dungeon and somebody else marks off one of their milestones and that dungeon gets destroyed while you are in it, not only do you lose the ability to complete the quest that you were on, but your character gets knocked out and they have to go back to the castle and kind of regroup and start over. So I thought that was a super cool way to implement a timer, to implement the milestones, to keep some pressure on the players. It also creates a better sense of pressing your luck when you are questing, and it reinforces the idea of a land in peril. So to get over that roadblock, I just went back in time. I went back to the design. What was I trying to accomplish with that? And I came over that. Another thing was the bonuses and penalties for enchantments. So in this game, it is possible to enchant your weapons with certain enchantments. There are 6 different enchantments that you can apply to your weapons: fire, ice, lightning, cursed, blessed, and magical. And then there are also a number of keywords associated with the weapons, such as, let's see, where is that? Such as melee or ranged, slash, blunt, pierce, slow, fast, and so on. And some of the enemies are weak against those things. And some of those enemies might be tough against those things. And at first I had it to where if you had something that the enemy was weak against, then the challenge would be easier. But then if they were tough against it, the challenge would be more difficult. And that just wasn't really working out with the system that I had designed. And I went back in time, I went back to the design. Okay, what am I trying to accomplish here with these bonuses and penalties? It's just, building your character, making your character more powerful, and developing your character for certain types of encounters. And so I decided to change that. Instead of making the challenge harder or easier with those bonuses or penalties, you're just going to be adding and subtracting dice to your dice pool to have a better chance or a harder time overcoming that challenge. And to me, that makes things more fun, because one of the things that I really like about this game is building your dice pool and just throwing dice. And I think that I overcame that design design hurdle in a very simple way. And it just kind of dawned on me one morning. I was like, oh, wait, we can just add dice to your dice pool or take dice away for your dice pool, depending on how many bonuses or penalties you have. So it just made things a lot easier. I was really happy to apply that lesson that I learned. Don't patch, go back. And I stuck to that, and I ended up overcoming 2 design hurdles, 2 challenges that were preventing me from moving on with the game. Okay, so those are the challenges that I am facing as a designer. But now let's talk about the challenges that you, the player, will be facing. And after we talk about the challenges, we will also answer some questions that some Dungeon Dive patrons have about the game. And some of them are quite interesting. So these are the rules here. I'm getting really close of being completely done, but I did want to talk about the different kinds of challenges. So the main mechanism in this game is rolling a pool of D6. And this is using kind of typical, Arkham Horror style dice rolls, where you need a number of successes. Often it's just one success. Sometimes it's multiple successes, and you're looking for 5s or 6s on a normal roll. And then there are different ways, depending on the gear, depending on the character's abilities, different ways to manipulate those dice, to re-roll the dice, but looking for a number of 5s or 6s. If a challenge is normal, you need 5s and 6s. If a challenge is difficult, you need a 6. If the challenge is easy, you need a 4, 5, or 6. So I love that system. I love that kind of dice pool system. It just works. It's easy to wrap my head around. Now, sometimes some challenges will be more complex, where you need a certain number of successes, and you can keep rolling as long as you roll a success. So let's say you were facing a challenge and you needed 3 successes. You had 3d6, and it was a normal challenge, meaning you needed a 5 or a 6 to overcome the challenge. You would roll that, and oh my gosh, nothing. Okay, so if you fail to roll a single success, and you have no way of generating a success, no way of manipulating these dice to generate a success, you have failed at that challenge. You lose a point of determination, which is basically your HP, and your turn is over. Okay, so let's say it's the next turn. And there you have 1 success. Okay, and I needed 3 successes to overcome this challenge. I could place this die on the card to be 1 success, and then I could keep going. But now my dice pool is only 2 dice. Looking for that 5 or a 6. Oh, I got it. All right, a 6. Okay, I have 1d6 left. I can press my luck. I can try to get that last success that I need in only 1 turn, or I can lock these dice in play. And each player will have a certain number of tokens. And with those tokens, you could say, okay, I'm ending my turn, so I will lock those dice. I will place 2 locked tokens on this card showing my locked successes. I will check off a turn marker at the bottom of my character sheet, and my turn will be over. Then it's the other player's turns, or if you're playing solo, it's your next turn. And starting at your next turn, you get to use your full dice pool again. So now I have 3 chances to get that 1, 5, or 6. And those locked dice, those locked counters, those locked chips, those can never be lost unless you just escape from the challenge. And so I think that's a really cool way. It's a really neat press your luck system. and it gives you a choice to keep going and do everything in one turn, or lock a couple successes, lock a single success, pull back, regroup, and on your next turn, you get to roll another full set of D6. So on some cards, you will have multiple challenges that have to be done in a row from top to bottom. So you might have, jump over the ledge or jump over the spike trap, and you have to do a certain kind of challenge, and you need 2 successes. You can do that all in one turn, and if you do, you can go on to the next challenge, and each next challenge allows you to regenerate your full pool of dice. And so not all of the cards will have 3 or 4 different challenges. Some will only have 1 challenge, some 2. A few will have 3, and a couple of the very difficult challenges will have 4 different steps that you have to do to overcome that one quest. But I'll have an icon that shows the number of successes to complete, and then something to show that you can progress to the next challenge. You can keep going as long as you generate 1 or more success. You can stop your turn to lock successes and then start the next turn with a full dice pool. And if you do not generate a success, you lose all of your successes except for those that are locked, and you also lose a point of determination. And determination is, like I said, one of your stats here. You have athletics, brawn, concentration, and determination. Determination is not only your HP, but it is also a currency. And you can spend a point of determination to re-roll a D6 at any time. If you ever go to 0 determination, your character, your hero has been knocked out, and they get teleported back to the castle. They regroup. They start their next turn with a roll of 1d6 determination, and then they set out again. You can also heal determination by visiting the castle, a city, or a village. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of challenges. There are a handful of different kinds of challenges. First is we have combat challenges, and those are probably going to be the most typical kind of challenge. And in a combat challenge, you will assemble your dice pool by taking your character's core stat. So let's say I was playing a warrior. A warrior's core stat is their brawn. And if my brawn was 3, then my base dice pool for a combat challenge would be 3 dice. And let's say I had a sword that gave me a +1, so I would have 4 dice. And then that would be the dice that I get to use for my combat challenges. And like I said, some challenges are easy, some are difficult, some are normal, and some challenges need multiple successes, some need 1. Some challenges are multiple stages of that challenge. Some challenges are stat challenges, and for a stat challenge, you just take whatever dice you have as your stat. As a warrior, I would have a concentration of 1, and so if I was doing some kind of concentration challenge, I would just have 1d6. However, there are items, there's like a helm of concentration that adds a +1 to your concentration. So anything that adds to your stat challenges, you can add that to your dice pool. So combat challenges are called CC challenges. Stat challenges are SC challenges. So anything that adds to your stat challenge will add to your dice pool. There are also adventure challenges, and these are often kind of like dice manipulation challenges. And each one of those will tell you how many dice you start with. Sometimes you will start with 5 dice, and these will be, there will be different kinds of little mini games maybe, or different style Yahtzee games to come up with adventure challenges. There are items, there are pieces of gear that will help you overcome adventure challenges. So one adventure challenge might be to roll a full house, and you kind of do a Yahtzee game. So you're looking for a full house there. Something like that. You might have a stacking challenge, just little things to add a little bit of spice to the game. Adventure challenges will probably be the least frequent, the most rare type of challenge in the game. But there are pieces of gear, there are items that will help you overcome those adventure challenges. And then there are escape challenges, and those are EC. And escape challenges are when you want to escape from a challenge because you just can't overcome it. You have a 3 success concentration challenge, and you are a warrior with 1d6. It's just going to take forever. And so you can try to escape from that particular quest. When you want to abandon or escape from a challenge, you take your highest stat, whichever it is, and you need to get a success in order to escape from that challenge. And then there are the boss challenges. And boss challenges are a little bit different. They incorporate a number of the above all in one card. And in order to generate a single success to defeat the boss, you have to do all of those challenges in one turn. And so I'm still developing that. And but now that I've overcome that initial hurdle of abandoning making the bosses stronger by those milestones, it's going to be much easier. And I was dreading designing the bosses, but now I'm really looking forward to designing those bosses. So in the last couple of weeks, I have also generated all of your loot tables because there are no loot cards. You will be keeping track of everything on a character sheet, and that is just because I want to keep this game small. I don't want players having a whole bunch of cards they have to manage. So you will roll on each of the weapon charts, or each of the loot charts is a D20. So we have D20 weapons, we have D20 armor, and D20 items. And then there's also a way to enchant your items or your weapons with those 6 enchantments, such as fire, ice, lightning, cursed, and blessed, and magical. So that's a little discussion on challenges, of how the challenges are different, how I am facing challenges, how the player will face challenges, and just the challenges in general for a land in Peril. So now I have some questions, and some of these are quite detailed. Let me find my list of questions here. Okay, so here's some questions from Dungeon Dive patrons. If you want to ask me questions about the game, I'm going to put out this blast and ask for questions every time I do one of these design diaries. And if I have any new questions to answer, I will attempt to do so. Some of these may be answered later because maybe I don't know what the answer is. But let's see here. So any idea when it will be complete? How will it be made available? Crowdfunded, game crafter price. Okay, to be realistic, I would say that this game will be done in a year, maybe a year and a half. How will it be made available? Right now, I am leaning towards Game Crafter with the release of a print-on-demand version. Because it's just a single map and decks of cards and character sheets and a rule book, it should be pretty easy for people to make their own. And if I go the Game Crafter route, that really only focuses on the continental United States as far as shipping goes. Shipping anywhere else is just way too expensive via the Game Crafter. And so for people living anywhere else, I would want a print-on-demand version. Now, I am not adverse to shopping this game around to a publisher to help put this game out. However, I think this game is going to have very limited appeal. It's an old school style hex crawling adventure game with lots of dice rolling. It's not card play. It's not Gloomhaven. It is black and white, which black and white games already are a niche of a niche. And so I don't think this game is going to have very wide appeal, even within the community that likes dungeon crawls and adventure games. It is very old school in its design. And I am targeting a certain demographic, and I think that demographic it's a subset of a group. I am not opposed to crowdfunding, but the only way I would crowdfund the game is if I was something like 99% done with the game, to where it was just ready to go. And I was basically crowdfunding to generate the funds to make the game available to a wider audience. So I haven't quite come up with the solution to that yet. Price, I have no idea. There's going to be 0 plastic in the game. So that will keep the dice will be plastic. Maybe I should go wooden dice. Maybe I should make a completely plastic-free game. I don't know. Wooden dice are probably more expensive than plastic dice. It's going to be meeples or tokens moving around. The tokens will be cardboard. There's no minis or anything like that. So I'm going to try really hard to keep the price down. What are your future plans for it? Supplements, spin-offs, full RPG mode? Yes. So these rules were taken from an RPG that I was developing in a very similar vein. But I wanted to focus a little more on making a board game first because it's just a little easier for me. However, as I'm sure some of you realized, learning about the challenges, learning, and as we go into other design diaries and seeing how the rules work, this would be very, very easy to turn into a full RPG. And I do have the plan to do that. That will be one of the initial expansions for the game, is a full RPG mode for A Land in Peril, the RPG. Supplements, expansions. One of the things I said in the original design diary is I don't want to be known as a designer of a whole bunch of games. I want to be known as a designer of one game. And that game is A Land in Peril. And I want this game to have a really, really long tail. I want to be designing this game or adding to this game for a long time. And one of the ways I plan on doing that is releasing more maps. The maps are 8.5 by 11. They will be, I'm thinking about making them dry erasable so people can write on them. But yeah, I can have all kinds of different maps. The maps can have different quest locations. Those quest locations can have their own decks of cards. Very easy modular system to mix and match. We can have different types of terrain, and those different types of terrain can have their own decks of exploration cards, of encounter cards. You know, each deck will be like 20 cards or so. So that's one way I want to expand it. I was already thinking of having a series of islands with a water in between. In the water, I would have a chart of like weather events and at sea events that you could roll on during your movement phase. As you can see, there are no mountains, there are no swamps. So those are definitely expansion ideas. The next map will have, a mountain range and some swamps, or maybe some lakes, some more water-based encounters, things like that. And then depending on which map you use, you will always use 9 different decks of cards. So you will always have 5 quest decks, and 4 adventure decks. And just because everything will fit in this nice little card holder there. So super easy to apply and to come up with expansion and supplemental ideas. And because it's in quadrants and because it'll be map based, I can also create specific quest locations for each map. For instance, I could say that this expansion, I release a little small deck of a little small expansion for the dungeon on A1. And so any map that has an A1 and a dungeon, you could use that particular deck of cards for a custom dungeon, for a thematic dungeon. Maybe this dungeon now, the A1 dungeon you can play would be all kind of fungus themed. And you're fighting fungi creatures and going through a dungeon made up of giant mushrooms. Or you could have a special cave or a special mystic tower, things like that. So little booster packs of kind of custom bespoke quest locations is also something I am thinking of. I want to be able to, one of the reasons why I'm leaning towards Game Crafter is, or even print on demand from drive-through, is I want the ability for me to very, very quickly upload an expansion and have it available for people to purchase. I don't want to have to do a crowdfunding every time I want to expand something. And another thing that I'm thinking of, which I think would be super cool, is if I had different artists do different maps. And so maybe we had, the Perplexing Ruins map, or the Black Oath Entertainment map, or the Chocalypse map. People who I've talked about and I talk with and I'm friends with via the Dungeon Dive could contribute to the world of A Land in Peril. And I do want to keep this game alive for a really long time. Okay, what's the core loop look like? The core loop is you have a beginning of your turn phase, a movement phase, encounter phase, and an end of your turn phase. On your movement phase, you start in the castle, you roll a d6, you add a certain bonus. That's how many places you can move. You can move along roads and get a bonus. Anytime you move into a forest, you have to stop and have a forest encounter. and you are moving out to a quest location. When you land on a quest location, you draw a quest card and you encounter that card. You have to get 2 matching quest locations in different quest locations. So you have to go to 2 dungeons or 2 caves or 2 mystic towers. You have to do that 4 times. You go back to the castle to get your 4 quest gems. Once you have your quest gems, then you can travel to one of the 4 boss layers, and you want to defeat the boss. That is the game right there. Are you thinking of about splitting gameplay between exploration and combat? Combat is very simple. It's more like Talisman. It's more like Runebound. It'll all be done on a card with some dice. Is this going to touch on your personal preference for having an overland crawl with the ability to delve into dungeons? No. This game is a small game. It's going to take up this much space right here. Like, I want this to be the entire game. You know, this card holder, this 8.5 by 11, a small dice tray, and a character sheet. And even if you're playing 4 players, you can all sit around a small card table. I want this game to actually fit for solo play on a large TV tray. That is my goal. So things are going to be condensed. Things are going to be abstracted and small, but there is still going to be a lot of variety. Let's see. I'd like to see, okay, this one is complex here. I'd like to see a matrix of similar games and what boxes each game ticks. I think if you go back to the first episode and you can see my influences, Arkham Horror, Mertwig's Maze, and Talisman and Runebound. So think of those 4 games with commentary on why you created this game. I created this game because I want a game that offers up all of the kinds of random encounters and adventure that I want, but something that can be played in a small space. Let's see, in business terms, you'd call this SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. But this would be less formal and more anecdotal. It would be a good tool for understanding the niche within a niche that this game fills. Yeah, this is a niche of a niche game. It's targeting a very limited demographic. I do not expect this game to be a top seller by any stretch of the imagination. Just the fact that it's in black and white, but that's something that we can return to in more detail in another video. Would like to see how combat plays out. Is it tactical? No, it is not tactical. I do not like tactical or skirmish combat, really. It's all done on cards. So think Talisman, Runebound, Arkham Horror. That's the combat. You will not be positioning. You will not be flanking or anything like that. There will be lots of loot. There will be lots of killing monsters. The loot is pretty cool. Let me take a look at some of the loot tables here. You can get an idea. So I need to reorder these because I'm going to order them in stages. So if you get a random reward, you can roll a D6 for less powerful loot, maybe a D10 for more powerful loot, and then maybe a D20 in order to get the super ultimate loot. But we have basic swords, maces, stilettos, and staves. Those will be one-handed and two-handed. Each one of those will add 1 to your combat challenges. All of those are melee, but then we have slashing, blunt, pierce, pierce, and blunt. And so those are the different types of damage that they can do. We have a quicksilver, sword, mace, stiletto, or staff. Those are the same as the basics, but they add the fast quality. Then we have crystal swords, mace, stilettos, and staffs. Those are the same as the basics, but they add 5 rerolls. So throughout the game, as you're using your crystal sword, you have a chance to reroll dice 5 times. Then we have an enchanted sword, mace, stiletto, staff. It's the same as a basic, but it adds an enchantment. And at that time, you will roll on your enchantment table to see what kind of enchantment you have found. If you have found a fire sword, an ice sword, a lightning sword, and so on. You can also visit a magic blacksmith in the castle and at cities to enchant weapons. And there is also an opportunity to choose which enchantment you want. Because one of the things you can do is you can scout, you can go on reconnaissance to learn information about the bosses. And maybe you learn that the boss at A1 is weak against lightning. And so you have a new quest now to get a lightning sword. And so you need to do whatever you can to get that lightning sword. So when you face that boss, you have a better opportunity to defeat that boss. We have great swords. So these are two-handed and they give you a +2. They are melee, but they are slow and slashing and so on. We have bows and arrows, which are ranged. Throwing daggers, which are ranged. Explosive jugs, those are like grenades. Those are ranged. We have a sword of stat. And so you can find a sword of a stat. And when you find a sword of stat, you roll a d3 and you get to add a bonus to that stat. Athletics, bronze, or constitution. A mace of stat. A stiletto of stat, a staff of stat. You have a quicksilver sword. I think that one was duplicated. Was it duplicated? Yes. So this one needs to be duplicated. This one needs to be, something else needs to happen there. But then if you roll a 20 on your loot roll, you get the ultimate quicksilver enchanted weapon of stat. So you will get the ultimate quicksilver fire sword of brawn. And so that's a super powerful weapon. That will cost something like 50 gold. It can only be purchased once per game per hero, but that's kind of like your ultimate weapon. Your ultimate armor is the Elder's Holy Armor of stat. And so that adds two different stats, but it takes up your body and your head space. When you equip weapons, you have one hand of weapons, two hand of weapons, so you can have an offhand weapon or an offhand shield. You can have a piece of armor and a helm and up to 6 items. And let's see if I haven't lost the items yet. Where do the items go? Here we go. We have Potion of Core Stat, so a Potion of Brawn. You can use a potion to earn a point of brawn or a concentration. We have different potions. We have adventuring kits. We have scrolls of teleportation, magic carpets, scroll of recall, a portal scroll, a talisman of luck, talisman of travel, talisman of navigation. Some armor and some items will add to your movement, so will make navigating the map a little easier and so on. And then finally, let's see, I'm also interested if it combines overland, crawl, and dungeon diving. No, it does not. How long does a game take? I don't know. How much bookkeeping? All the bookkeeping will be what you see here on your character card. So there is some erasing and writing. What is combat like? We went over that. Can you play with just one character? Yes, it plays from 1 to 4 players. 1 player is solo. Any other is competitive. Hopefully it's not a campaign. Nope. I don't think I would ever design a campaign game unless you want to play this like an RPG, but then you can come up with your own campaign system for that. Or at least it's just your character carrying over from session to session with a free world emergent type narrative rather than any sort of scripted narrative campaign. I will never make a game with a scripted narrative campaign. You have my you have my word on that. Maybe a choose your own adventure. Maybe there will be at some point maybe a paragraph adventure that you can go on in this game, but probably not. So, all right, you guys. Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at A Land in Peril at this second design diary. I hope you like this box cover art and the warrior and the mage and the map and learning about the different challenges I am facing while also being enticed about the challenges that you might face as the player in A Land in Peril. So, well, hopefully we'll have another design diary in a month or so. We will talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.